Rain traced diagonal lines across the conference room windows as Elena Brooks entered, her arms full of binders she'd spent the previous night organizing. Arthur Hale stood at the far end of the table, one hand pressed flat against the polished wood, the other rubbing slow circles at his temple. "Elena." His voice came out rougher than usual. She set the binders down carefully. "The Pacific Crest team called from the airport. They'll be here in 40 minutes. He nodded but didn't look at her. That wasn't like him. In the 3 years she'd worked as his executive assistant, Arthur Hale had been unfailingly direct, even brusque. He made decisions quickly and moved on. Hesitation wasn't part of his vocabulary. "Close the door," he said. Elena felt something shift in her chest, a small warning she couldn't name yet. She closed the door and turned back to face him. "I need to postpone the meeting," Arthur said. He was looking at the table rather than at her, which made the words feel heavier somehow. "Postpone," she repeated carefully. "Arthur, they flew in from Singapore specifically for today. Victor Kwan doesn't reschedule. You know that." "I know." He finally looked up and she saw it then. Not just fatigue, though there was plenty of that. Something else. Something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "I've been having these episodes. Dizziness. Yesterday I couldn't remember the name of a property we've owned for 5 years. This morning I mixed up numbers in a report I've been working on for weeks." Elena had noticed small things over the past month. Arthur asking her to repeat information he should have remembered. A slight tremor in his signature. The way he'd grip the edge of his desk when he stood up as if steadying himself. "Have you seen a doctor?" she asked. "Several." His jaw tightened. "They're running more tests. But whatever this is, Elena, I can't walk into that meeting room feeling like my brain is wrapped in fog. If I make a mistake in front of Kwan, if I seem weak or uncertain, he'll walk, and he'll go straight to Blackwell Holdings, their primary competitor. A company that approached real estate development with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, buying up struggling properties and stripping them for parts. If Blackwell got the Pacific Crest contract, it would be more than just a lost deal. It would shift the balance of power in the market." "What if we bring in Marcus?" Elena suggested, referring to the chief financial officer. "He knows the numbers inside and out. Marcus is in London closing the Meridian acquisition. He won't be back until Friday. Grant, then." Arthur's expression darkened. "Grant Mercer would use my absence as ammunition. You know he's been positioning himself for years, waiting for me to stumble." Elena did know. Grant Mercer, the chief operating officer, had a particular talent for appearing helpful while subtly undermining. She'd watched him redirect credit, reframe failures, and build alliances with board members who valued ambition over loyalty. "So what do you want to do?" she asked. Arthur exhaled slowly. "Tell them there's an emergency, family matter, something that can't be helped." Elena thought through the implications. The Pacific Crest deal was worth $280 million. It represented expansion into 3 new markets and partnerships with developers they'd been courting for years. Beyond the immediate revenue, it would establish Hale Meridian Group as a serious player in sustainable urban development, a sector Arthur had been trying to break into for the better part of a decade. Postponing would raise questions. Canceling would raise more. And yet, watching Arthur now, seeing how tightly he gripped the table edge, how carefully he was controlling his breathing, she understood this wasn't a choice. It was survival instinct. Unless, she heard herself say, "I take the meeting." Arthur's head snapped up. "What?" "I've been in every planning session for the past 6 months. I helped build the financial projections. I know the risk assessment models, the sustainability metrics, the partnership structure." She spoke quickly before her rational mind could catch up and stop her. "I can present the deal. Elena, you're not a senior executive. No, but I'm senior project coordinator. That's not nothing. And more importantly, I know this project better than anyone except you." She stepped closer to the table. "Kwan's team will ask about implementation timelines. I built those. They'll want to know about our Shanghai office capacity. I coordinated that expansion. They'll push back on risk mitigation. I wrote those protocols." Arthur was shaking his head slowly, but she could see him considering it. That's what she'd learned about him over 3 years. He valued competence over credentials. He'd built Hale Meridian from almost nothing by making unconventional decisions and trusting his instincts about people. "If this fails," he said carefully, "the board will want someone to blame. And it won't be me. I know. Grant will use it as evidence that the company is in chaos, that leadership is broken down, probably." Elena. He met her eyes. You have twin 8-year-olds, a mortgage. I know you're still dealing with custody arrangements. If this goes wrong and the company takes damage, you'll be the first person they let go. You understand that? She did understand. She understood it with the kind of clarity that comes from having lived close to financial precarity for most of her adult life. Her marriage to Caleb had fallen apart 2 years ago, and the divorce had been expensive in ways that went beyond money. He'd fought her on everything: custody, asset division, even the apartment she'd rented after moving out. The court battles had drained her savings. Some months she still ran the numbers twice, making sure everything balanced before she paid rent. Her job at Hale Meridian was the anchor point. Good salary, benefits, stability. Losing it would mean starting over, and starting over at 37 with 2 kids felt different than starting over at 25. But she also knew what would happen if this meeting didn't occur. The deal would collapse. Arthur would have to explain why. Questions would multiply, and Grant Mercer would sense blood in the water. I'll do it, she said. Not because I think it's safe, because it's the least bad option we have. Arthur studied her face for a long moment. Then he reached for his briefcase and pulled out a blue folder, sliding it across the table toward her. Victor Kwan values 2 things above all else, Arthur said, his voice steadier now that a decision had been made: precision and respect. Be exact with numbers. Don't inflate or minimize. If you don't know something, say so and tell him when you'll have the answer. Elena picked up the folder. Her hands felt steady, which surprised her. He'll test you, Arthur continued. Probably about Hong Kong. They had a failed development there 3 years ago. If he brings it up, acknowledge it directly. Don't make excuses. Show him we've learned from similar mistakes. Okay. And Elena. Arthur's expression softened slightly. Thank you. I don't have a lot of choices right now, but if I did, I'd still choose you. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and walked toward the door. In the hallway, she stopped and leaned against the wall for just a moment, letting herself feel the full weight of what she'd agreed to. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother, picking up the kids from school. Lily has a play date at 4. Should I cancel? Elena typed back, No, let her go. I'll be home by 6. She hoped that was true. She hoped a lot of things were true, that she could do this, that Arthur would be okay, that her life wouldn't implode if she failed. Then she straightened her jacket, picked up the folder, and walked toward the conference room where 6 people who'd never heard of her were waiting to decide whether she was worth their time. The conference room felt different when she entered it alone. Larger, somehow. The 6 men around the table turned to look at her with varying degrees of curiosity and impatience. Victor Kwan sat at the center, his expression neutral in a way that suggested he'd long ago perfected the art of revealing nothing. Good afternoon, Elena said, setting down her materials with deliberate care. Mr. Hale has been called away on an urgent personal matter. He's asked me to present on his behalf. A pause. One of the younger associates exchanged a glance with his colleague. Kwan leaned back slightly in his chair. And you are? Elena Brooks, Senior Project Coordinator and Executive Assistant to Mr. Hale. I've been directly involved in developing this proposal from its initial concept. I see. Kwan's tone gave away nothing. We were expecting to negotiate with Mr. Hale personally. I understand. I'm authorized to discuss all aspects of the proposal, answer questions about implementation, and address any concerns about our capacity. She kept her voice level, professional. Not apologetic, but not defensive either. If there are strategic decisions that require Mr. Hale's direct input, I can arrange a follow-up call within 24 hours. Another pause. Kwan glanced at the documents in front of him, then back at Elena. Very well, he said. Proceed. The next 90 minutes tested every piece of knowledge she'd accumulated over 3 years. Elena walked them through the development timeline, the financial projections, the sustainability metrics that set this project apart from conventional real estate ventures. She fielded questions about zoning regulations, construction partnerships, market analysis. When someone asked about their Shanghai office capacity, she had the exact numbers. When they pushed back on the projected timeline for permitting, she acknowledged the uncertainty and explained the buffer they'd built into the schedule. Kwan said little, but she could feel him evaluating every answer, every hesitation, every moment of confidence or doubt. Then he asked the question Arthur had warned her about. 3 years ago, we experienced significant losses on a mixed-use development in Hong Kong. The project was structurally sound but failed to achieve occupancy targets. Kwan's gaze was steady. How do you ensure this venture doesn't repeat those mistakes? Elena took a breath. She could deflect, minimize, redirect. Instead, she met his eyes directly. We studied that project extensively, she said. The development was well designed, but it misjudged the target market. It aimed for luxury residential in a district where demand was actually highest for mid-range commercial space. The design was impressive, but it didn't serve the community's actual needs. She pulled up a slide showing their market research. For Pacific Crest, we've spent 18 months analyzing demographic data, employment patterns, transportation access, and existing commercial density. We're not building what we think looks good. We're building what the data tells us the specific location needs. Kwan nodded slowly. And if the data changes? We've structured the project in phases. Each phase is independently viable. If market conditions shift, we can adjust the subsequent phases without compromising what's already built. She showed him the phase timeline. It's more conservative than a single-build approach, but it's also more resilient. For the first time, Kwan's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close to approval. The meeting ended with a commitment to move forward, pending review of some technical specifications. They would send their final decision within 48 hours. When they left, Elena sat alone in the empty conference room for several minutes, her hands trembling slightly now that no one could see them. She'd done it. Maybe. Probably. She wouldn't know for certain until Kwan's team sent their response, but she hadn't failed spectacularly, which felt like a minor miracle. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Arthur. She called him back. They're reviewing the technical specs, she told him. But Kwan seemed not dissatisfied. Elena, Arthur's voice sounded strained. I owe you more than I can possibly repay. Let's wait until we actually have a signed contract. Still, what you did today was my job, she interrupted gently. I'll send you my notes from the meeting. Try to get some rest. She hung up before he could protest, gathered her materials, and headed back to her office. Grant Mercer was waiting in the hallway. Interesting development, he said, falling into step beside her. Arthur's urgent personal matter. Yes, Elena said neutrally. Must be serious for him to miss the Pacific Crest presentation. Everyone knows how much this deal matters to him. Grant's tone was casual, but his attention was focused. How did it go? Well, I think. We'll know more in a couple of days. You presented alone. It wasn't a question. Grant had a talent for gathering information, for knowing things he wasn't supposed to know. Elena suspected he had allies throughout the company who fed him useful details in exchange for his favor. Mr. Hale trusted me to handle it, she said. Bold choice. Grant stopped at his office door. Let's hope it doesn't backfire, for everyone's sake. He disappeared inside, leaving Elena in the hallway with the distinct impression that she'd just been issued a warning. That evening she made it home by 6:30. Her mother was in the kitchen helping Noah with homework while Lily practiced piano in the living room, producing a halting version of a Mozart minuet. How was work? Her mother asked, looking up from Noah's math worksheet. Complicated, Elena said. She kissed Noah's head. How was school? Marcus said my shoes are weird. Marcus doesn't understand fashion, Elena replied automatically, making Noah smile. Later, after the kids were in bed, she sat at her kitchen table with a glass of wine she was too tired to drink and reviewed her notes from the meeting. She'd done well. She knew she had. But she also knew that doing well once didn't establish anything permanent. It just meant she'd avoided disaster today. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Victor Kwan. Your presentation was thorough and impressive. We'll have our decision by Wednesday. Thank you for your professionalism. Elena read it 3 times, then forwarded it to Arthur with no additional comment. He responded immediately, See? I told you. She smiled despite her exhaustion, then opened her laptop to check the custody calendar. Caleb had the kids this coming weekend. She needed to remember to pack Noah's inhaler and Lily's library books. Ordinary life. Continuing alongside the extraordinary. That was the part she was still learning to balance. How to hold both realities at once. How to be the person who commanded a conference room and the person who remembered library books. The next morning, Arthur wasn't in the office. His calendar showed meetings, but when Elena called to confirm his attendance, he answered from home, Having a bad day, he admitted quietly. The dizziness is worse. Have you heard anything from the doctors? Not yet. More tests scheduled for Friday. Elena rescheduled his meetings without comment, fielding questions from various department heads about his absence. She said he was working remotely on strategic planning. Most people accepted this. Grant Mercer, she noticed, did not. On Wednesday afternoon, the email arrived. Pacific Crest was moving forward. They would begin contract negotiations immediately. Elena printed the email and drove to Arthur's apartment, a sleek high-rise overlooking the harbor. He answered the door looking exhausted but alert. "We did it," she said, handing him the printout. Arthur read it twice, then sat down heavily on his couch. "You did it. Don't diminish that. It was your strategy, your relationships, your reputation, executed by you." He looked at her seriously. "Elena, I need to tell you something. The doctors found a mass, brain tumor. They're running more tests to determine exactly what kind, but the preliminary indication is that it's aggressive." The words landed with terrible clarity. Elena sat down in the chair across from him. "What does that mean?" she asked. "In terms of treatment prognosis, it means I'm going to get worse before I get better, if I get better at all." Arthur's voice was steady, but she could see the effort it took. "I'm telling you because you need to know what we're dealing with. This isn't temporary. The company needs to prepare." "What do you want to do?" "Keep working as long as I can, delegate more, rely on people I trust." He met her eyes. "I'm going to need you to take on more responsibility, Elena, significantly more. I'll pay you accordingly, but I want you to know what you're agreeing to before you say yes." Elena thought about her children, her mortgage, the custody arrangement that was still fragile enough that any major disruption could reopen old arguments. She thought about Grant Mercer circling like a shark. She thought about the dozens of ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about Arthur building this company from nothing, about the hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on its stability, about the projects they'd planned that would actually improve communities instead of just extracting profit from them. "Tell me what you need," she said. Over the following weeks, Elena's role transformed in ways that were never formally announced, but became increasingly obvious to anyone paying attention. She began attending executive meetings, not as someone taking notes, but as someone offering strategic input. When Arthur was too exhausted to review acquisition proposals, she reviewed them and provided recommendations. When board members called with questions, Arthur started redirecting them to her. The transition was gradual enough that most people accepted it as a natural evolution. Grant Mercer was not most people. "You're overstepping," he told her one afternoon, cornering her outside the executive conference room. "Arthur's assistant doesn't make strategic recommendations to the board. Arthur's senior project coordinator does," Elena replied evenly. "I was promoted last month. Check the HR records." It was true. Arthur had formalized her expanded role with a title change and a substantial raise. It still didn't make her Grant's equal in the organizational hierarchy, but it gave her standing. "A title doesn't make you qualified," Grant said. "You're wearing authority you haven't earned, and yet the Pacific Crest deal is proceeding smoothly. Our third quarter numbers exceeded projections, and Arthur trusts my judgment." She met his gaze steadily. "Maybe qualification looks different than you think." Grant's expression hardened. "Be careful, Elena. This company has its own gravity. People who rise too fast tend to fall hard." He walked away, leaving her with the uncomfortable awareness that he was right about one thing. She was moving through territory she'd never trained for, making decisions that had implications she couldn't fully predict. Every day felt like a test she was taking without knowing the material. At home, the balance became more difficult. Noah developed a persistent cough that required multiple doctor visits. Lily struggled with a difficult teacher and came home in tears twice in 1 week. Elena found herself working until midnight after the kids were asleep, then waking at 5 to prepare for early meetings. Her mother helped when she could, but Ruth was 68 and had her own health concerns. The infrastructure Elena had built to manage single parenthood was straining under the additional weight of her expanded responsibilities. Then Caleb filed a petition to modify their custody arrangement. The papers arrived on a Thursday evening, delivered by a process server who caught her just as she was leaving work. Elena read them in her car before driving home, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Caleb was requesting primary custody, claiming that Elena's increased work responsibilities made her unable to adequately parent. He cited missed pickups, late dinners, and what he called emotional unavailability. He was asking for the kids to live with him primarily, with Elena getting them every other weekend. The irony was visceral. Caleb, who'd been largely absent during their marriage, who'd forgotten school events and missed bedtimes because he was out with friends, was now positioning himself as the more available parent. Elena knew what this actually was. Caleb's girlfriend wanted to play house, and having the kids full-time would complete the picture. It had nothing to do with Noah and Lily's well-being and everything to do with Caleb's need to appear stable and responsible in his new relationship. But knowing that didn't make the fear less real. Family court was unpredictable. Judges made decisions based on limited information and subjective impressions. If Elena appeared too career-focused, too unavailable, she could actually lose primary custody. She called her lawyer from the parking lot. "It's not unusual," Jennifer explained calmly. "Modification petitions happen frequently when one parent's circumstances change significantly. The question is whether your increased work responsibilities actually impact your parenting quality." "They don't," Elena said. "I'm still home for dinner most nights. I still help with homework, go to school events, put them to bed. I'm just working after they're asleep instead of watching television. Can you document that? Show a typical week?" "Yes." "Good. Do that. I'll file our response. The hearing will probably be scheduled for some time in the next 2 months." Jennifer paused. "Elena, I have to ask, is there any truth to what he's claiming? Any nights you've missed bedtime? Any events you've had to skip?" Elena thought about the evening last week when a crisis call had kept her on the phone until 9, about the parent-teacher conference she'd had to reschedule, about the school play she'd almost missed because a meeting ran long. Some, she admitted, but less than 5% of the time. "And when I can't be there, my mother fills in. That's reasonable. No parent is available 100% of the time. We'll present evidence of your actual involvement. Testimonials from teachers and caregivers, documentation of the kids' well-being under the current arrangement." After they hung up, Elena sat in the parking lot for several more minutes, feeling the walls close in from multiple directions. At work, she was carrying responsibilities she'd never imagined. At home, she was fighting to maintain the life she'd built for her children. There was no space left for error, no buffer for unexpected complications. She drove home and found her mother reading to the kids in the living room. They looked so small, so trusting. Noah with his glasses sliding down his nose, Lily with her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. The idea of them living primarily with Caleb made Elena's chest tight. "Everything okay?" her mother asked, reading Elena's expression. "Work stuff," Elena said, not wanting to discuss the custody petition in front of the kids. "I'll tell you later." She made dinner, helped with homework, supervised baths, read bedtime stories. Normal routines, ordinary moments. They felt precious in a way they hadn't before, shadowed by the possibility of loss. Later, after the kids were asleep, she told her mother about Caleb's petition. "That man," Ruth said, her voice sharp with controlled anger. "He barely remembered their birthdays when you were married, and now he wants primary custody? He's doing this because he can, because he knows I'm stretched thin and it makes me vulnerable. What do you need? Evidence that I'm still a good mother, that my job hasn't changed, that—" Ruth squeezed her hand. "You're an excellent mother. Anyone with eyes can see that. The kids are happy, healthy, thriving. That doesn't happen by accident." Elena wanted to believe that would be enough. But she'd seen enough of the legal system during her divorce to know that what should matter and what actually does matter in court weren't always the same thing. The next morning, Arthur called her into his office. He looked worse than he had a week ago, his movements slower, more careful. "I'm starting treatment next week," he said without preamble. "Aggressive chemotherapy. The doctors say it might slow the tumor's growth, buy me some time. But it's going to make me less functional, at least initially. What can I do? I'm creating a new position, Chief Operating Officer. I want you to take it." Elena stared at him. COO was C-suite, executive level. It would put her on par with Grant, give her legitimate authority over major strategic decisions. "Arthur, that's—" "Grant will lose his mind. Grant is already circling. He smells blood. If I don't formalize a succession structure now, he'll use my illness to stage a power grab, and the board might support him because he looks like the safe, traditional choice." Arthur leaned forward. "You're not the safe choice, Elena. But you're the right one. The board will fight this. Some will. Helen Roth will support you. She's been impressed by your work on Pacific Crest. Marcus will support you once he understands the situation. Others will need convincing. He slid a document across the desk. This is the formal appointment. I'm presenting it to the board Friday. I wanted you to know first. Elena picked up the document, scanning the language. Chief Operating Officer, reporting directly to the CEO, responsible for day-to-day operations and strategic implementation. This makes me a target, she said quietly. Yes, Grant will fight me at every turn, probably, and if your treatment doesn't work, She couldn't finish the sentence. If I die, the board will look for my replacement. As COO, you'll be a candidate. Not the only one, not necessarily even the front runner, but you'll have a seat at the table. Arthur's expression was serious. I can't guarantee what happens after I'm gone, but I can set things up to give you the best possible chance. Elena thought about the custody hearing, about Caleb's lawyers arguing that she was overcommitted and unavailable. Becoming COO would only intensify that argument. It would mean more responsibility, longer hours, higher stakes. It would also mean financial security, real authority, and the ability to shape what this company became. I need to think about it, she said. You have until Friday morning. Elena spent the next 2 days in a state of sustained anxiety, weighing variables that refused to balance neatly. She talked to her lawyer, who cautioned that the promotion would complicate the custody case but wouldn't necessarily determine the outcome. She talked to her mother, who told her to follow her instincts. She talked to Jennifer from HR, who explained exactly what the role would entail and what support structures would be available. Mostly, she sat alone at night after the kids were asleep and tried to envision both futures, the one where she said yes and the one where she said no. Thursday evening, she received an email from Grant Mercer. The subject line read, "A word of advice. Elena, I've heard rumors about Arthur's plans for organizational restructuring. I hope you'll forgive me for being direct. Accepting a position you're not qualified for helps no one. It puts the company at risk, damages your own reputation, and ultimately serves only Arthur's ego. If you truly care about Hale Meridian, you'll decline gracefully and allow someone with appropriate experience to guide us through this difficult transition. This isn't personal. It's simply realistic assessment of what the situation requires." Elena read it 3 times. The language was carefully diplomatic, but the message was clear. Stay in your lane, or I'll make sure you regret it. She closed her laptop, checked on the kids one more time, and made her decision. Friday morning, she arrived at the office early and went directly to Arthur's office. "I'll take it," she said. "The COO position. I'll take it." Arthur smiled, tired but genuine. "Good. The board meeting is at 10. Prepare yourself. It's going to be contentious." The boardroom was fuller than usual. All 12 members had made time to attend, which suggested that rumors of Arthur's announcement had circulated widely. Elena recognized the tension in the air, the kind that preceded significant organizational shifts. Arthur entered slowly, leaning slightly on a cane he hadn't been using a month ago. Elena followed, carrying a folder with prepared remarks she hoped she wouldn't need. "Thank you all for coming," Arthur began, settling into his chair. "I'll be direct. I've been diagnosed with a brain tumor. It's aggressive, and while I'm beginning treatment, the prognosis is uncertain. In light of this, I'm restructuring executive leadership to ensure operational continuity." The room went still. Several board members exchanged glances. Helen Roth, the longest-serving member, leaned forward attentively. "I'm appointing Elena Brooks as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately," Arthur continued. "She will assume responsibility for day-to-day operations, strategic implementation, and cross-departmental coordination." Grant Mercer, who'd been sitting with deceptive casualness, straightened. "Arthur, with all due respect, this is extraordinarily irregular. Ms. Brooks has no executive experience, no advanced business degree, and no established track record at this level. She closed the Pacific Crest deal when I couldn't," Arthur said calmly. "She's been managing operational decisions for the past 6 weeks with demonstrable success. She has institutional knowledge that would take any external hire years to develop. Managing operational decisions in your absence is not the same as being qualified for C-suite leadership," Grant argued. He turned to address the full board. "This is an emotional decision, not a strategic one. Arthur is understandably worried about the company's future, but the solution isn't to promote someone beyond their capabilities. It's to implement proper succession planning with experienced executives." "Such as yourself?" Helen Roth asked mildly. Grant didn't blink. "If that's what the board determines is best for the company, yes. I've been COO for 7 years. I have extensive executive experience and established relationships with all our major partners and investors. You've also presided over 3 failed acquisitions and consistently underperformed on operational efficiency metrics, Arthur noted. The last major project you led personally came in 22% over budget and 6 months late. That project faced unforeseen regulatory complications, which Elena would have anticipated because she reads regulatory updates obsessively and maintains detailed tracking of policy changes across all our markets, Arthur interrupted. Grant, you're competent, but Elena is what this company needs right now. Marcus Chen, the CFO who'd flown back early from London specifically for this meeting, spoke up. I've worked with Elena extensively over the past 2 months. Arthur's right that she has unusual depth of knowledge about our operations, but Grant also raises valid concerns about experience. He looked at Elena. Can you explain how you'd approach the role? What would your priorities be? Elena had anticipated this question. She stood, feeling every eye in the room fix on her. My first priority would be maintaining operational stability during Arthur's treatment. That means ensuring clear communication channels, consistent decision-making processes, and transparent reporting to this board. She spoke clearly, without apology. I'm not claiming to be the most qualified executive in the market. I'm claiming to be the person who can maintain continuity right now, in this moment, with minimal disruption. That's a caretaker role, Grant said. Not a sous. It's both, Elena replied. In the short term, yes, I'm focused on stability, but I also have specific strategic objectives: accelerating our transition to sustainable development practices, improving our supply chain efficiency, which is currently fragmented across too many vendors, strengthening our community engagement protocols so we're not just developing properties but building actual value for the neighborhoods we work in. Community engagement doesn't appear on quarterly reports, Grant noted. It appears in long-term occupancy rates, tenant satisfaction scores, and renewal percentages, Elena countered. The projects where we've invested in community relationships have consistently outperformed those where we've treated development as purely transactional. Helen Roth was nodding slightly. Arthur, what's the board's role in this decision? I'm asking for your support, not your permission, Arthur said. As CEO, I have the authority to structure executive leadership as I see fit. But I value this board's counsel, and I want you to understand my reasoning. The reasoning seems clear enough, another board member, David Park, said dryly. You're dying and you want to handpick your successor. But Grant's point stands. Elena is unproven at this level. If she fails, the company suffers. If she succeeds, that's excellent. But we're gambling on an unknown. Every leadership transition is a gamble, Arthur said. Grant is known, yes, but what's known about him includes significant underperformance and a tendency to prioritize his own advancement over company welfare. Elena is less proven, but what she has proven is reliable. The debate continued for another 40 minutes. Arguments circled back on themselves. Grant positioned himself as the stable, experienced choice. Arthur emphasized Elena's specific value and intimate knowledge of ongoing projects. Board members asked questions ranging from reasonable to pointlessly skeptical. Finally, Helen Roth called for a vote on whether to support Arthur's appointment of Elena as COO. The vote was 7 in favor, 4 opposed, 1 abstention. Enough to move forward, but not enough to silence doubts. After the meeting, Grant caught Elena in the hallway. You realize this changes nothing about the fundamental problem. You're not equipped for this role. We disagree about that. No, Grant said, his voice dropping to something more personal. You're hoping you're equipped. You're gambling that you can learn fast enough to avoid catastrophic mistakes. And maybe you can. But that's a heavy burden to carry, Elena, especially when you have other pressures in your life. The reference to her personal situation was subtle but deliberate. Grant had clearly been gathering information. My personal life is none of your concern, she said evenly. It is when it affects your availability and performance. Custody battles are notoriously time-consuming and emotionally draining. If you're distracted, the company suffers. He smiled without warmth. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because someone needs to be realistic about what you're taking on. He walked away, leaving Elena with the uncomfortable awareness that he was half right. She was taking on too much. The question was whether too much was simply difficult or actually impossible. That evening, she sat with Arthur in his apartment, reviewing the transition plan they'd developed. Grant's going to be a problem, she said. Grant's always been a problem. The difference now is that you have formal authority to contain him. Arthur looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from deep places. Elena, I need to tell you something. The doctors adjusted their timeline. The tumor is growing faster than they initially expected. I have months, not years. Maybe 6 if the treatment goes well. Maybe 3 if it doesn't. Elena felt the words land heavily. What do you need from me? Keep the company stable. Keep our projects focused on doing actual good, not just generating profit. And when I'm gone, he paused. Fight for this. Not just the position, but what the company stands for. Grant would turn it into another profit extraction machine. Don't let that happen. Arthur, promise me. She met his eyes. I promise. Over the following weeks, Elena learned what it meant to operate at executive level. The decisions were larger, the consequences more permanent, the scrutiny more intense. She made mistakes, authorized an acquisition that turned out to be overvalued, missed early warning signs on a supply chain disruption, misread a negotiation with a key contractor. But she also made good decisions. She restructured their approach to a struggling development in Detroit, turning what would have been a write-off into a viable project. She negotiated better terms with 3 major vendors, reducing costs without sacrificing quality. She personally intervened in a labor dispute that Grant had been handling with typical heavy-handedness. Finding a resolution that satisfied both the company and the workers, Arthur's treatment progressed, and with it came the visible decline. He stopped coming to the office except for critical meetings. His voice weakened. His memory became less reliable. Elena found herself making more decisions independently, then briefing him afterward rather than seeking approval in advance. The custody hearing was scheduled for early December. Elena's lawyer was cautiously optimistic, but the opposing counsel had been aggressive in discovery, requesting detailed documentation of Elena's schedule, her work commitments, her availability. The night before the hearing, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed running through possible questions, possible challenges, possible outcomes. At 3 in the morning, she got up and checked on the kids. Noah was sprawled sideways across his bed, covers tangled. Lily was curled tight, her stuffed rabbit clutched close. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever, the judge decided she would fight for them with everything she had. The hearing itself was less dramatic than she'd feared and more exhausting than she'd imagined. Caleb's lawyer painted her as an absent workaholic, citing specific instances where she'd been late for pickup or missed school events. Elena's lawyer countered with documentation of her consistent involvement. Testimonials from teachers, evidence of the children's well-being. The judge listened carefully, asked probing questions of both sides, and reserved decision. You'll have a ruling within 2 weeks, he told them as the session concluded. Elena drove home feeling hollowed out, uncertain whether she'd done enough. That evening, her mother made dinner while Elena helped the kids with homework. Everything felt fragile, temporary. Later, after the kids were asleep, her phone rang. Arthur, just wanted to check in, he said, his voice weaker than it had been even a week ago. How did it go? I don't know yet. The judge will rule in 2 weeks. You'll keep them, Elena. Anyone who spends 5 minutes watching you with those kids would know you're exactly where you belong. She wanted to believe that. How are you feeling? Tired, but that's normal now. A pause. I'm proud of you, you know. Not just for what you're doing at work, for all of it. For keeping everything balanced when most people would have crumbled. I'm not sure it counts as balanced when everything feels like it's constantly on the verge of falling apart. Arthur laughed softly. That's what balance actually looks like. It's not stability. It's controlled falling. They talked for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. Elena sat alone in her kitchen, drinking cold tea and thinking about controlled falling, about the distance between what she wanted and what she could actually manage. 2 weeks later, the custody ruling came through. The judge upheld the existing arrangement. Caleb's petition was denied. Elena sat in her car reading the decision 3 times before she let herself believe it was real. Then she called her mother, called her lawyer, called Arthur. That night, she held her children close and felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Not everything had fallen apart. Some things had held. At work, the challenges continued but felt more manageable now that her personal foundation was secure. She led quarterly planning sessions, negotiated partnerships, made difficult decisions about underperforming projects. Grant continued to undermine her when he could, but his influence was waning as Elena proved herself capable. In March, Arthur was hospitalized. In April, he moved to hospice care. In May, surrounded by Elena and a small group of people who'd known him longest, Arthur Hale died quietly. The memorial service was large, well-attended, respectful. Elena spoke briefly, keeping her remarks focused on Arthur's vision for the company and his commitment to doing development work that actually served communities. Afterward, Arthur's lawyer gave her a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter in Arthur's shaky handwriting. "Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Thank you for everything you did, not just for the company, but for making my last months feel purposeful instead of just sad. I've left you controlling interest in Hale Meridian. Fight for it. Make it mean something. Arthur." Elena stood in the parking lot holding the letter, feeling the weight of what he'd entrusted to her. The board met the following week to discuss leadership transition. Grant immediately positioned himself as the logical choice for CEO. Elena said little during the meeting, letting the board members talk through their concerns and preferences. When Helen Roth asked Elena directly if she wanted the position, Elena paused before answering. "I want to continue Arthur's work," she said carefully, "whether that means serving as CEO or supporting whoever takes that role. My priority is keeping this company focused on doing good development work." The vote, when it came, was closer than the COO appointment had been. 6 in favor of promoting Elena to CEO. 5 in favor of bringing in an external candidate. 1 in favor of Grant. Elena Brooks became CEO of Hale Meridian Group on a Tuesday in June, 8 months after she'd walked into a conference room and taken a meeting she had no business taking. That evening, she came home to find her kids making dinner with their grandmother, pasta with too much butter, exactly the way they liked it. "Mom," Lily said, "we made dinner." "So I see," Elena said, setting down her briefcase and stepping into the kitchen. "It smells amazing." Later, after they'd eaten and cleaned up and put the kids to bed, Elena's mother squeezed her shoulder. "You did it," Ruth said quietly. Elena thought about all the things that phrase could mean. She'd kept her kids. She'd survived the past year. She'd become CEO of a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "I'm still figuring out what it actually is," Elena said. "That's because it's not finished," her mother replied. "It's just beginning." And standing in her small kitchen in the apartment, she could now easily afford to leave but hadn't. Elena realized her mother was right. This wasn't an ending. It was just a different kind of middle, less precarious than before, but still requiring the same daily choice to keep moving forward. She checked her phone one last time before bed. An email from the board chair confirming tomorrow's meetings. A text from her assistant asking about scheduling priorities. A message from Noah's teacher requesting a conference about his progress in math, ordinary complications, ongoing responsibilities, the work of building a life that held together under pressure. Elena set the phone down and went to sleep, knowing she'd wake up tomorrow and do it all again, controlled, falling in the direction of something better.